I've lived in my home for 20 years. With the recent recession, the value of my home has decreased considerably. Why do my property taxes go up when the value of my home goes down?
Schools may account for over 60% of your property tax bill. The library, park district, local township, Cook County government, water reclamation district are some of the other taxing bodies that you pay. Each year, these taxing bodies have a levy meeting where they decide how much money they'll need for future operations. By law, the levy can only be raised 5% or the rate of inflation, whichever is less. Typically, the average increase is in the neighborhood of 3%. Let's say the high school board believes the levy increase won't be enough to cover the cost of new computers for the student library and determine an extra 8% levy is needed.
A referendum is a request for additional money that is over and above what is allowed to ask by law. So the high school's request for additional money is placed on the ballot during an election for the public to vote on. You may say, okay, they passed the referendum. We pay an extra 11% that year. But it's not just an extra 11% that year, it's an extra 11% going forward. Because once it's raised at the 11%, the following year when the high school has its levy meeting, they may raise it another 3%. It's 3% on top of the 11%. So what you have is a steadily rising demand for taxes, and that demand has to be met. And in most cases, the same property owners from one year to the next having to meet that demand. So you can see how you can end up paying more even when the value of the property is going down.
Let's talk about the second reason why taxes go up when your property value goes down. There are 102 counties in Illinois. All counties, except for Cook, assess residential and commercial property at the same rate. In Cook County, residential property is assessed 10% of value and commercial property is assessed at 25% value. Businesses pay 2.5 times more than residents. When a business closes, who pays the gap in revenue? When a business on a large property, responsible for millions in taxes, closes its doors, you've got a lot less revenue because a vacant building's assessment is reduced significantly. Therefore, everybody, residents and other business owners alike, have to fill the gap left by vacant properties. Here is the third reason your tax bill may have increased. If you received an exemption one year, but didn't receive it the next, you can end up paying more. Check your second installment bill in July to confirm. If you are not receiving exemptions you are entitled to, such as homeowners or the senior exemption, call the Cook County Assessor's Office. You can file a certificate of error to receive a refund.
I hope you found this explanation on why your property taxes go up when the value of your home goes down helpful. It's important to keep in mind that taxing bodies will get what they are asking for. Revenue must be met. If your taxes go down, someone else's will go up to meet revenue demand. I know no one likes hearing it, but at least you know a little bit more about why things are happening.
Okay, looks like it's a little bit past 6, so we'll get started. My name is Dan Patlak. I'm a commissioner at the Cook County Board of Review. Thanks for coming tonight. My goal for you this evening is that by the time you walk out of here, you're going to know a lot more about how to file an appeal at the Cook County Board of Review and a lot more about how to file a good appeal to give yourself the best chance to get a reduction. So I worked at the Board of Review quite a few years ago as an analyst, and I ran across this cartoon. I think it's pretty apropos from the point of view of a lot of taxpayers. So I'm going to do my best to take the maze and try to make it into sort of a straight line for you. By the way, I'm mic'd up here. They're actually filming this, and I'm not used to it. Normally I'm just talking. Can everyone hear me okay? All right, good. So I'm going to start out by addressing something that people are really confused about, and actually I had a question out there that illustrated it. So my office versus the Cook County Assessor. So Cook County Board of Review is not the Cook County Assessor's Office. Cook County Assessor's Office is at 118 North Clark Street, downtown in the county building. Their offices are located on the 3rd and 9th floor. The Board of Review, same building, but we're on the 6th floor. The Cook County Assessor is a fellow by the name of Joe Barrios. Anybody ever hear of him? Okay, a few of you. So he's in charge of the Assessor's Office. The Board of Review is run by myself and 2 other elected commissioners from other districts. And we do different things. The Cook County Assessor's main job is to assess all property in Cook County. Whether it's here, whether it's in Orland Park, whether it's in Lamont, doesn't matter. He assesses all property. They're also in charge of administering all exemptions. So homeowner exemption, senior freeze, all the exemptions, they're in charge of that. They also have a sideline. Their sideline is they will accept assessment appeals from property owners who think that the assessment that has been levied by the assessor's office is incorrect, is too high. But that's not their main job, that's their sideline job. For us at the Board of Review, our main job is reviewing assessment appeals from aggrieved taxpayers who are unhappy with the Cook County Assessor. So my guess is that there's at least one person in this room that at some point earlier in the year filed an appeal with the Cook County Assessor. They probably brought their letter, and they were going to show it to me to say, look, you guys turned me down, except we didn't, because it's not our office, all right? So the way it works is every year you can file an appeal with the Cook County Assessor. And you get to do it during certain time periods. They open townships for certain periods of time. And the time for filing with the assessor was quite a while ago. Once the assessor gets all the appeals, adjudicates them, and gives their answer, then at that point in time, the Board of Review can open up for the township in question. So we opened up Wheeling a while ago. Julie, do you recall the deadline date? I can't remember. Yeah.
It's December 12th.
The 12th. That's okay. That's what I thought. So we opened up about a month ago, and we'll be closing on the 12th for the Board of Review. So the time for appealing your assessment to the Cook County Assessor, that's expired. The time for appealing to the Board of Review is current and will expire on December 12th. Okay? If you filed with the Cook County Assessor and he turns you down, that's okay. You can still come to us. We don't care that you got turned down by the Cook County Assessor. Their opinion is really, of no importance to us. We look at everything new. So if you present evidence that convinces us that you're over-assessed, we're going to grant a reduction. If you filed with the assessor and you were granted a reduction, that's okay too. Maybe you don't think the reduction was sufficient and you think you could get a further reduction. Once again, if you present us with evidence that's compelling, we can give a further reduction. So we're not going to look at it and say, oh, they already got a reduction, throw that one in the garbage. We won't do that, okay? If you didn't file an appeal with the assessor, that's okay too. You're not required to file with the assessor in order to later file with the Board of Review, okay? So for anyone here who is still a little bit confused, I want to say it again, the Board of Review is not the assessor's office, okay? So whatever they do, whatever they did, We're not responsible. And of course, if we grant a reduction, they're obligated to honor our decision. I also want to mention something. Some of you may have availed yourself of services at the township assessor. Every township in Cook County, every suburban township has a township assessor. Township assessors do not assess property. It's all done by the Cook County assessor in Cook County. So a better name for a township assessor would probably be taxpayer advocate, because they're there to help people. If you are confused about your tax bill, you can bring it in. They'll talk to you about it, what it means, and how it was all computed. If you didn't get an exemption, they can help you fill out the proper paperwork and send it in. If for some reason you're due a refund, they can help you with that paperwork. If you think you're overassessed, you want to file an appeal, they can help you file the appeal with the Cook County assessor, and then subsequently with the Cook County Board of Review, and they can help you get evidence and all that sort of thing. So the Wheeling Township assessor is a gentleman by the name of Jerry Sadler, and actually he succeeded me because I used to be the Wheeling Township assessor, and when I was elected to the Board of Review, Jerry had been working for me, and he was promoted. He was appointed to that position, and now he's been elected to the position. So in any case, the township assessor is not the county assessor. Doesn't work for the county assessor, doesn't have to listen to the county assessor. It's part of township government, separately elected, separately funded. So I get people sometimes to say, I filed an appeal with the assessor down on Arlington Heights Road. Well, yeah, you might have gone there. They might have had the paperwork and helped you fill it out. They may have given you evidence to use, but you didn't file it with them. You got their help, and then maybe they mailed it in for you, or maybe they gave it back to you and you mailed it in, or maybe they helped you do it electronically, but you didn't file with them, and they have no decision-making power on an appeal to the county assessor or to the Board of Review. Okay? All right, so I mentioned that I used to work at the Board of Review. I was an analyst there for 8 years, and during that time I worked for a commissioner by the name of Maureen Murphy, and she did these seminars all the time. She did so many of them that eventually she asked me if I would start doing them for her, part-time. And over the years, I probably did about 60 of them for her. And what I found out very quickly, regardless of where I was, if I was doing a seminar in Arlington Heights, and this is a big district that she represented and I represent now, or if I was doing a seminar in Orland Park, or Lamont, or Lansing, questions from residential property owners were the same over and over and over again. So, since I know all the questions, I'm going to try to answer them for you before you ask them. And then, if you've still got more, I will stand up here and try to answer them for you. I brought 3 staff members from the board. They're all analysts, and they can help to answer your questions as well if you've got some specific questions about your property and maybe what you should do or whatever. So, but we'll do all the questions at the end if that's okay with you so that I can get through this, because it's going to take a while, but hopefully all the information will be helpful and really valuable to you. So the first question that I want to answer for you is, why should I file an appeal? So there are a variety of reasons why you should file an appeal. First reason is it's free. We don't charge you to file an appeal at the Board of Review. The only cost to you is whatever work you might put in looking up the evidence to present to us to show that, in fact, the assessor's assessment is too high. Now, of course, everybody has the right to file or to hire an attorney if they want to. You're not required to. If you're a single-family residential property owner, you don't have to hire an attorney. You only have to hire an attorney if you own a property that is incorporated. Usually, those are commercial or industrial properties. But if you're like me, and by the way, I live in Wheeling. Just so happens I live right down Dundee Road. If you turn right on St. Armand and left on Berkshire, that's where I live. So during the course of a year, I probably get a dozen mailings from attorneys who tell me that I'm overassessed, and I am, by the way. And they want to represent me. And so how many people have gotten at least a couple of pieces in the mail? Okay. So there's attorneys that do this for a living. Generally speaking, they're professional. They know what they're doing. And so if you want to avail yourself of their services, that's certainly your right to do. The upside of it, the main upside is you don't have to do any work. You sign your name. They take care of it for you. Hopefully, down the road, you get a letter in the mail saying you got a reduction. But they're going to expect to be paid. And I would like to submit to you that when you leave here, with the information I gave you and the resources I present that are at your availability, for most of you, you should be able to do it by yourself. You shouldn't need to hire an attorney, I would say, unless you have a really complex case that an ordinary person wouldn't be able to handle. So anyways, that's one reason for filing an appeal. Next reason, get a good chance for a reduction. The first year I was at the Board of Review in 1999, 54% of all the parcels that filed an appeal got a reduction. It varies from year to year. Last year and the year before, just coincidentally, 62%. I've seen it go as low as 49%. I've seen it as high as 73%. Now, those reductions aren't all the same. Sometimes they're small, sometimes they're large, but, you know, if you got a success rate of 50% or more, that's not bad. And I would say the fact that you're here listening to me tell you how this is done probably gives you a better chance to get a reduction than, let's say, someone who files on their own who doesn't come to a seminar like this. So, next reason, you have an opportunity for multi-year savings. Every 3 years, the Cook County assessor reassesses property in Cook County. Last year, in 2016, the assessor reassessed the northern suburbs where we live. Had you filed an appeal in 2016 and received a reduction, that reduction in most cases would have been good for tax year 2016, 17, and 18 until the next triennial reassessment for the northern suburbs in 2019. If you file this year for 2017, that reduction in most cases will be good for 2017 and 18 until we get reassessed in 2019. So you can file one appeal and potentially receive multi-year savings. Now that's not to say that if you file this year and receive a reduction that you couldn't file next year. You can. Maybe next year you look at the information out there and you decide that you're overassessed, the market has changed, you just find more comparable properties that would justify a lower reduction, whatever it is. And we're going to go through reasons for filing an appeal. And so if something comes up, you want to file again, it's certainly your prerogative to file once each year if you want to. But the main thing I want to communicate is you can get more than 1 year saving with only 1 year of appeal. By the way, we're all taxed 1 year in arrears. So if you're granted a reduction by the Board of Review this year, right now, it's for 2017. So you're going to get your 2017 first installment tax bill on February 1st. That's just going to be 55% of your total previous year's tax bill, 55% of the year 2016. Then, if everything goes according to schedule, and it may not, but if you get your tax bill on July 1st, that will reflect any reduction granted by my office. So you won't see that reduction realized on your tax bill until that second installment that you get in 2018. All right, last reason for appeal. Let us suppose that you're convinced you're overassessed. You gather all your evidence, you send it in to us, and you wait at home for the letter that's going to grant you a reduction. We look at the evidence, and we determine that, in fact, you're not overassessed. You're just confused. You're actually underassessed. We won't raise your assessment. So nothing bad can happen from filing an appeal at the Board of Review, okay? And if, by the way, you turn in information about your neighbor's house, and we determine that your neighbor is underassessed, we're not going to raise their assessment either. So there's no downside to filing an appeal at the Board of Review, okay? All right, so next question. How do I know if I'm overassessed? There are a variety of reasons why you might file an appeal at the Board of Review. The number one reason is called lack of uniformity, and all that really means is that your house compared to other similar homes in your area is assessed higher. So let me take a little time and explain what we think about at the Board of Review in terms of lack of uniformity. Uniformity, okay? Because we're looking at some particular things that maybe you're not going to think about right away. Thing number one is classification. So in Cook County, all property is classified. Vacant property is class 1. Residential property is class 2. Commercial apartment building, 7 units or more, class 3. Commercial and industrial property, class 5A, 5B. Within class 2 residential, there are subclassifications. 202, 203, 204, 234 is a bi-level. 299 is a condo. And by the way, if you have a condo, then what I'm going to talk about right now doesn't really apply. And condos are pretty easy in terms of filing an appeal and getting it adjudicated. It doesn't take a lot of work on the homeowner's part. But in any case, if you have a class 204 home, we want you to compare that to other class 204 homes. Don't give us examples of class 205 or 203 homes to justify your claim that you're overassessed. Give us the 204s. Next is neighborhood. So every township is broken down into neighborhoods by the Cook County assessor. A neighborhood could be a couple blocks long and wide, it could be a couple miles long and wide. Every neighborhood is assigned a neighborhood code. That means a number. So it could be number 5, number 28, number 76, number 115. Whatever neighborhood code that your house is in, we want you to give us comparable properties that are in the same neighborhood code. The only exception to that would be if you have such a unique home that there's no other homes like yours in your neighborhood, in which case you would want to write us a note explaining that, and then provide us with comparable properties that were in the next closest neighborhood or the next neighborhood that is most like your neighborhood. Next is age. If you've got a 50-year-old home compared to other 50-year-old homes, or 45-year-old homes, or 55-year-old homes, generally speaking, try to keep your comparables close in age. The closer they are in age, the more weight we're going to give the comparables. Next is construction style. So as far as the assessor is concerned, there are 4 construction styles. There's brick, which is the same as masonry, brick and frame, and stucco. Your house will fall into one of those categories. To the best of your ability, compare your home to other homes of the same construction style. Now, we understand that when you're trying to stay within the classification and the neighborhood code and the age, that starts to narrow your choices. So if it turns out that you've got a brick home and then down at the end of the block there's another home just like yours but it's brick and frame, you can use that as a comparable. We may make an adjustment on our end based on the difference in the construction style, but you can use that. However, my suggestion is that if you can make your case that you're overassessed using homes that are of the same construction style, that's better than using homes that are of a different construction style. We're going to give more weight to those that are the same rather than those that are different. Okay, next is square footage. So the most common type of property, classification-wise in Cook County, is a Class 203. Definition of a Class 203 is between 1,000 and 1,800 square feet, less than 2 stories. You may be saying, what does he mean, less than 2 stories? I grew up in a house in Skokie, and it had a roof like this, second-story roof. We called it a Cape Cod. The assessor probably would have said that my house was a 1.5-story house, and if my first floor was 1,000 square feet, he would have said the second floor was 1,500 square feet, total 1,500 square feet, Class 203, okay? In any case, if you have a Class 203 home, and let's say it's 1,200 square feet, ideally, we'd like you to give us comparable Class 203 homes that are also 1,200 square feet, or 1,100, or 1,300. Now, could you give us a comparable home that's 1,700 or 1,800 square feet? Sure you can. Will we take that into consideration? Yes, absolutely. However, we're going to give more weight to those homes that are closer in square footage than those that are farther away in square footage. So to make your best case, assuming that you can find good comparables that justify what you're claiming, use the comparables that are closer in square footage. Lastly is proximity. I mentioned earlier that we want you to stay within the same neighborhood, but a neighborhood could be a couple miles long and wide. So if you provide a comparable property to us that is a mile away, we will certainly take it into consideration. However, we're going to give more weight to homes that are closer rather than those that are farther. So the ideal comparable property would be the house that's on the immediate left and right of your house, or right across the street, or on your block, or on the block that's right across the street. I would suggest that as you are looking for comparable properties, start by looking at properties that are close to your house, and if you can find some that make your case, great. If you can't, then work your way out in concentric circles until you either figure out that you're fairly assessed or until you find some comparable properties that justify your claim, okay? Just a couple of other things to go along with this. If you've got a house with a basement, try not to compare to a house that doesn't have a basement. We know that basements add value. If you've got a house with a 2.5 car attached garage, try to compare it to other homes that have a garage of some sort at least, rather than homes that have no garage at all. It's not that we won't look at those comparables, but they're not as uniform, and we'd rather have good uniform comparables. So that's what we're looking at in terms of uniformity. So the question is, where do you go to get this information? Oh wait, no, sorry, I mixed up my question. So, how do you figure out, once you have looked at homes that are uniform, whether your house is assessed higher or lower? So, I got a formula here for you, and it's in the booklet, but I'm going to go through it with you. So, your assessment's broken down into two parts: your land and your building. In this example, the land is $10,000, the building's $15,000, total assessment $25,000. What you want to figure out is what's the assessment per square foot of living area of my home compared to other homes that are like my home. So the way you figure that out is you take the building assessment and you divide it by the building square footage. So let's just say you have a class 203 home that's 1,500 square feet. In this example, you would take a building assessment of 15,000 and you would divide it by a building square footage of 1,500. And if you did that, what would you get? 10. Very good. 10. Right. So you would get 10. So if that's your house, that means you're at $10 a square foot. So the next question is, well, what's everybody else at that has a house like mine? If you do your research and you find that everybody else is at $9.50 and 10 and 10, 15, 11 and 12 and 13, you're probably pretty fairly assessed. At least based on lack of uniformity, you probably don't have a very good case. If, however, you uncover information that shows that there's a bunch of houses that are at $9 and $8 and $7 and $6 a square foot, then that's your evidence to present to the Board of Review that you are overassessed based on lack of uniformity, and you should have a reduction in your assessment. All right, so the next question is, how do I get that information? So I'll give you two good places to go to. But the first thing I would suggest, if you go to the Cook County Assessor's website, which is cookcountyassessor.com, and by the way, it's a really good website. It's got lots of information about property taxes, exemptions, assessments, and I would suggest if you want to learn all about this stuff, and it's good to know about it, go to his website, click on all the drop-down windows, and read every single thing that's there. It won't take you a lot of time, but you'll learn a lot. One of the great things he has, though, is he has a database. The database contains information about all 1.8 million parcels of property in Cook County, and you can look up any of them. My suggestion is you start by, let me see, do I have a, no I don't. Okay, you start by looking up your own property. So I would go to that, see that top thing there? It says property pin search. Click on that, and you can look up your house by your property index number, which can be found at the top of your tax bill. Now, they also have it where you can look it up by property address, but I've used this thing before, and I found that using the address is sort of quirky. It doesn't always work. So the best way is use your property index number. And when you do that, you will get a printout, or it'll go on your screen. There'll be a photo of the house and a description of the house, and that description will say what neighborhood you're in, what the property classification is, the assessment broken down by land and building, the construction style, and a bunch of other pieces of information about your property. So I would suggest pulling that up and then doing that calculation I told you about. Then I would suggest printing out that page, writing down on it the assessment per square foot of living area, and you might also want to download it into a file in your computer, and I would just name the file like Board of Review Evidence, something like that. And I'll tell you later why I'm suggesting you do that. Anyways, and then pull it in there, okay? Then what you want to do is go ahead, once you've got the information on your house, and go look up information on other houses. So if you were to click on neighborhood search, can everybody see that? Is this sign in the way? Okay, let me see. Pull this out of the way. All right. So they give you a query. All you got to do is fill it in. So the top one says township. Everyone here probably lives in Wheeling Township. So you hit the drop-down window. It'll give you a list of townships. You click on Wheeling. Next one says neighborhood. Now, if you looked up your property earlier, you'll know what neighborhood you're in. It'll give you, do the drop-down window, pick the neighborhood that you're in. Last one says property class. You will look up the information about your property. You're going to know your property class. Hit the drop-down window. It'll list every property class that there is for residential property, and it'll actually give a description of what each type of class, you know, what the description is of that classification of property. Pick yours. Then click on search. And once you do that, you're going to get something that looks like this. A printout of all the properties that match that query. And that query is a basic description of your house without a lot of the details. So what I would suggest, and by the way, you know, this list could have 5 houses on it, or it could have 200, depending on where your house is located and the type of house. What I would suggest is this. Take a look at the address and figure out, you know, what's close to my house. So try to start with what's close. Then all the way to the right where it says assessed value. Now, that's the total assessed value. It's not the building assessment. So it's not a pure indicator of what's high or what's low. But I would say, generally speaking, look for the assessed values that seem to be low. Lower than yours, let's say. And pair those with the addresses that are close. And start by clicking on those. And when you click all the way to the left there on the blue, that's the property index number. Once you do that, you're going to get that same type of printout that you got before for your individual property, which looks like that. And by the way, you'll get more than that. It's just that's all we could fit in the slide here, okay? But down below, there's a bunch of other information. And I would suggest take a quick look at the photo. Look and, you know, it's going to be your neighborhood. It's going to be your property classification. But then look and see, you know, is it my construction style? Is the square footage close to what mine is? Is the age close to what mine is? And, you know, you have to sort of use your own judgment. But if the answer to those questions is yes, then do the calculation that I told you about a little while ago and figure out what's the assessment per square foot of living area. So if you're at 10 and this one's at 11, you wouldn't want to use it. It wouldn't be a good comparable to prove that you're over-assessed, so you can move on. But if you're at 10 and this one's 9, in that case, you might want to, at your pleasure, you could print it out and then write down on it, $9 a square foot. But you could also download it into that file that you created that said Board of Review Evidence, right? And so go through the process for as long as you want to until you're satisfied that you've educated yourself and found the information that you want. And at that point, you'll either know that you were fairly assessed, or you'll know that you've got good information to present to the Board of Review that, in fact, you're over-assessed and you should get a reduction. I mentioned earlier that there's 2 places to get this information, so this is my favorite because you can do it from your own house. You know, you don't have to go anywhere, you don't have to ask anybody for help. But there may be some people in this room that don't have a computer, or they have a computer and they don't know how to use it, or they just don't like doing queries, or they just want some help. So you've got your local township assessor's office. That's Jerry Sadler, and he has a staff of professional people that routinely help out taxpayers when they want to file an appeal. And they've got a database at their office. It's called the Assessor Information Management System. It's got the same information as the assessor's database. It's organized a little bit differently, and in some ways a little bit better, because they can do a query like this for you if you bring in your PIN number. And they can actually print out every house, and then next to it, it'll actually say the assessment per square foot. So if there's 100 houses like yours, you'll be able to see where your house falls in that group. And, you know, if it's 10th from the lowest assessed, at that point you might say, I don't think I need to continue with this. But if it's 10th from the highest, then you know that you've potentially got 90 comparable properties to use to convince us that, in fact, you're over-assessed. And what I would suggest you do is look at those and look at the ones that are close to your house. Whatever ones you pick out, they will print them out for you at the assessor's office, and then you can use them for your evidence. And there is a representative from the assessor's office here, Julia Lipka. Julia, would you mind just standing up for a minute and tell everybody the address, the hours of operation, and the phone number, and anything else you want to say about the office?
Okay, we're located at 1616 North Arlington Road, which is about a block south of College Lane Road on the west side of the street. It's a brick citizen quarter building. Our hours are 9 to 4:30. We suggest if you come in for an appeal, you try to be there around 4. It does take a few minutes to look up the information. And we do come up with our system is very helpful in doing your appeal. Our phone number, if you want to write it down, is 847-259-1515. You can also call us. We have come to the 21st century. We have email address, taxpayer assistance, if you'd like to write that down. Taxpayer assistance at wheelingtownship.com. If you would like, it's more convenient for you, you can email us at that email address with your name, address, and PIN number. We can look up the comparables, look up the information, email that back to you, and you can do an online appeal with the Cook County Board of Review by December 12th. Is the deadline for that. We also attach instructions, very well-written instructions from the Board of Review. People seem to be having very good luck with this. We haven't had any calls on that. And, you know, a little bit of information if there's anything about what we found. But, that email can work very well. It can save you time and a trip, and we respond to them the same day, and we'll get back to you the same day with the information. And then you can go online to the Cook County Board of Review website and do your appeal, which is also very simple.
Okay. So,
Oh, sure. Taxpayer assistance, one word, taxpayer assistance at wheelingtownship.com.
thank you, Julia. Appreciate that information. So that's how you file, or that's how you prepare an appeal based on lack of uniformity. There are several other reasons, though, so I'm going to go through those. The next one, recent purchase. If you purchased your home within the last 3 years, for us that means since January 1st of 2014, we can use the purchase price to help us determine what the assessment ought to be, as long as it's an arm's length transaction, which means not a foreclosure, not a short sale, not between relatives. So let me tell you how that would work. Let us suppose that the assessor has placed a market value, MV, market value on your home of $400,000. But you bought it a year and a half ago for $300,000. If he says it's worth $400,000, that means the assessed value is 10% of that, $40,000, because the statutory assessment level for residential property is 10%, so 10% of $400,000 is $40,000. If you provide us with your closing statement, which has the date of the sale, the amount of the sale, and the name of the buyer and the seller, along with an affidavit testifying that it's an arm's length transaction, not a foreclosure, not a short sale, not between relatives, we will take that $300,000 purchase price, multiply it by the statutory assessment rate of 10%, and we will say that your assessment ought to be $30,000, so we'll bring it from $40,000 down to $30,000. Now, if by chance you bought that house for $450,000, you would not want to use purchase price as a reason to file an appeal, because it's not going to help you. However, I will tell you that if you did that, we don't hold it against you. So a high purchase price won't hurt you if you want to appeal based on lack of uniformity or some other reason, but a purchase price that is below what the assessor says the house is worth can help you, okay? Okay, next reason for appeal, market value. So once again, let's say that the assessor says your house is worth $400,000. But you've been living there for 10 years, and you know that in your neighborhood, houses do not sell for $400,000, and you know that you could not sell your house for $400,000. You could file a market value appeal. Now, the only thing about that is, if you make that claim, we're not going to just believe you because you say it's true. You have to provide evidence. So what would be good evidence? Well, if you can get an appraisal. Appraisal would be good evidence. We would consider that expert testimony. I will tell you that we will not necessarily embrace the number on the appraisal. We're going to evaluate the appraisal. We're going to look at the comparables that were used. We're going to look at the adjustments that the appraiser made. If we think he did a good job, we'll use that number. If we think he was off by a little bit, we may use a little bit different number. If we think that he was just trying to help you out, then we're not going to use it at all. Having said that, though, generally speaking, an appraisal is very good evidence, and we're going to take it very seriously. Now, not all of you may want to pay for an appraisal, or you may not have one that was done due to a refinance or some other reason. And if that's the case, the next best place to get information about homes that have recently sold is your local realtor. They can print up information about homes that have sold over the last year or two that are like yours, that have sold for less than what the assessor says your house is worth. And you can use that information about homes in your areas that are like yours as your evidence to show that, in fact, your house is not worth $400,000. It's only worth $350 or $300 or whatever the homes might indicate. Okay, so you can send that in to us and we will consider it. Next reason for appeal, a factual error in the description of the property. So the Cook County Assessor keeps records on everybody's house. The number of bedrooms and bathrooms, whether or not you've got a basement, is it full or partial, is it finished or unfinished, do you have a garage, is it attached or detached, one car, two car, is there a side drive, is there a fireplace, do you have air conditioning, what's the age of the house, the type of roof, all kinds of information about your property. For our purposes at the Board of Review, the most egregious mistake the assessor can make in the description of your property is in the living square footage of the property. The reason for that is that if your house is 1,000 square feet, but the assessor says it's 1,500 square feet, you are probably paying about 50% more than you should on the building portion of your assessment. And if that is the case, you can come to us at the Board of Review and make a claim that there is an error in the description of your property on the square footage. Now, once again, if you come in and you have a little drawing of your house that you made, that's not going to be sufficient evidence to prove your claim. We need something better. So what do we need? Plat of survey. If you have a simple one-story home, we can look at the plat of survey, bird's eye view, length times width tells us the square footage. Not too hard. If it's a simple two-story, we say length times width times 2. But in many cases, a plat of survey by itself is not sufficient evidence because it doesn't always tell the whole story and you can't always tell the square footage from that. So another good piece of evidence would be an appraisal. Appraisals always have the living square footage. They often have a drawing by the appraiser of the footprint of the house that can help us determine square footage. If you've got architect's drawings, that could be good evidence. I will say, though, that as a former analyst, I looked at lots of architect's drawings. Some are easy to figure out, some are impossible. So you should look at that from the point of view of the analyst who's never seen your home and say, can an ordinary person figure out what this architect's drawing is trying to say? Now, another thing you could do is you could get a state licensed certified architect to come inspect your home, measure it, and write us a letter on his letterhead with his seal testifying to what the real square footage is. Photographs can sometimes be helpful. They sort of explain to us where one part of the house starts, another part of the house ends. Let me explain to you how you would actually measure the house to get the living square footage. You measure from the outside dimensions. So it includes everything inside the house. The walls, the hallways, the closets, the bathrooms, and all the regular rooms with a few exceptions. The basement, not counted as living square footage. Unheated, unfinished attic. A three-season room, the kind of room built on the back of the house, doesn't count as long as it's not heated. An attached garage, doesn't count. A two-story foyer. Let's say you live in a two-story home. You walk in, there's a large foyer, maybe it's 10 feet by 15 feet, and you look up and you see a ceiling not 8 or 9 feet from the floor, you see a ceiling sort of like this or maybe higher, that's in essence the bottom of the roof. In other words, there's a second story to the house, but in the area above the foyer, there's nothing, right? That's called a two-story foyer. Maybe the assessor has made a mistake and counted an extra 150 square feet up there of living space where in fact there is no living space. So that's an area where there can be an error. Now I don't want to suggest that the assessor is making that mistake all the time. He's not. But he does make that mistake once in a while, and considering that there's 1.2 million residential parcels of property, when you make a mistake like that once in a while, you're talking about thousands of mistakes. So, and if it's your house, then it's a big deal, right? So, two-story foyer. Bi-level. If you live in a bi-level style home, you know, the kind you walk in, there's a living room, dining room, kitchen, but you walk down 4 stairs, and you're in what's called the lower level family room. You're below grade, usually maybe the window's coming up to your chest, depending on how tall you are. That doesn't count as living square footage either. So lower level family room in the bi-level doesn't count. Again, I'm not suggesting that the assessor's making mistakes all the time with these things, but occasionally it can come up, okay? Now, if we agree with your claim, we can reduce the assessment proportionately based on the error that we think has occurred. However, we don't have the authority or the power or the access to change the assessor's record. What we will do is we fill out a form, we print off the information that you have provided us, the evidence, and we'll send it down to the assessor. At that point, the assessor may agree with us and he may change the record to reflect what we think it is and what you think it is. Or he may not be sure, he may send out a field check guy. The guy goes out and does the field check. Hopefully he does a good job and gets it right, but there's no guarantee. Or they may look at the information and believe that it's faulty and not do anything. It's up to you to follow up with the Cook County assessor to make sure that he changes the record. Because if you get relief from us in a particular year based on that, and the assessor doesn't change the record, he may very well jack up the assessment the following year, and you'll be back to see us, which you don't want to do, and we don't want you back to see us either, because it's a waste of taxpayer money to have the same people coming back for the same issue. So you've got to contact the assessor and you know, talk to them a little bit about getting that record changed, okay? So that's up to you. All righty, so back to our last reason for appeal, vacancy. So let's say something happens to your house, like there's a fire. As a result of the fire, you have to vacate the home while you're settling with the insurance company and getting a contractor in to fix the house up. We can grant what's called a vacancy on the building portion of your home for the time period that you're out of the house. Once again, you have to provide us evidence. So if you had a fire, good evidence would include a fire marshal's report, the insurance paperwork, maybe the paperwork that you're doing with the contractor, photographs of the exterior and interior damage to the house, an affidavit from you explaining what happened. We had a fire on this date. The house filled with smoke. There was fire damage. The fire department came in with their hoses and filled the house with water and destroyed everything. Now we're trying to fix it up. Meanwhile, we're staying, you know, at a nearby hotel. An affidavit from your neighbor testifying to the fact that they witnessed the fire and that they saw you, move out. You didn't come back for 3 months, whatever it is. Just my suggestion is, in a case like this, give us as much information as you possibly can. Really good evidence, if you've got a letter, let's say if you live in Wheeling, a letter from the village of Wheeling pulling your occupancy permit saying you may no longer live in this house. So we know you had to be out on this date. And then if you've got a subsequent letter restoring your occupancy permit, now we know you had to be out on this date, you could return on this date, great evidence. I'll tell you an interesting story. When I used to be an analyst, we had a guy come in, we had a hearing. You can have a hearing, by the way, and our hearings are pretty efficient. We get you in and out really fast. But in any case, he came in for a hearing. I was sitting at a sort of a raised bench a little bit like this, and he came up, and I said, what can I do for you? He says, I'm looking for a vacancy, and I've been out of my house since June. It was December at this point. I said, okay, what's the story? He says, I've got a crack in my foundation. And I said, I'm sorry to hear that, but a crack in your foundation is not sufficient evidence that you have to vacate your home. And he says, well, here, look at this. He whips out a letter, and it's from the village. He lived in Des Plaines. I read the letter, and it did, in fact, tell him that they were pulling his occupancy permit, but it didn't explain why. So I said, can you expand on this? I don't get it. He says, well, evidently I've got a river flowing underground beneath my home. And as a result, the ground has shifted and my foundation is cracked. I said, wow, that's pretty devastating. So I'm sure that they had an effect on the value of your home, but you're not here asking me to adjust the value on your home. You're asking me for a vacancy. So why? Why did the village write this letter? He said, well, the village is concerned that the ground is going to shift further, and as a result, the gas mains are going to rupture and the house is going to explode. So you got yourself a vacancy. So that was not very hard once I understood, and I never had one like that before or after, so it's unusual, but if something comes up, give us a try, maybe we can help you out. I want to warn you ahead of time though, if you're one of those people that has their resume on LinkedIn and you get a great job tomorrow in Texas and you move out right away and you're trying to sell your house and it's vacant, we're not going to grant a vacancy for that. If you have an elderly parent that has moved into a nursing home and the house is vacant, we're not granting a vacancy for that. If your elderly parent passed away and you're fixing the house up to get it ready for sale, we're not going to grant a vacancy for that. So it has to be something that's forced you out of the house. If it's not a fire, if you had a flood, if a giant cottonwood tree fell on your roof and crushed the house, if some whack job drove their car through your living room, if the tornado hit your house and took out a wall, if you've got mold in the basement and it's coming up the ductwork and it's making everybody in the house sick, those are all things that you could potentially use as reasons that you had to vacate the house, through no fault of your own. So just give us as much information as you possibly can. All right, so those are some of the major reasons that people file an appeal at the Board of Review. Next question is, how do I file an appeal? So there's two ways to file an appeal. The old way, which you can still do, is to file an appeal on paper. And if anybody wants to do that, we have paper appeal forms outside on the table, and you can take one tonight and fill it out and give it back to us. We will bring it downtown. When we get down there, we will take that piece of paper and put it in the timestamp machine. Then we'll take it and bring it to another room where somebody will work on a keyboard and enter in the information, and your appeal will have been filed. However, you will not get any letter or notification that the appeal is filed. You just have to sort of take our word for it. That's the old way. The new way is to file online. And if you're able to, it's a much faster, more efficient, better way that provides a lot of benefits. So to file online, first of all, to file online, you have to have an email address. And it has to be an email address that you can access. So if there's someone in this room that doesn't have an email address and is saying, aha, I will get my son to create a Gmail address for me and I will be able to file online, I suggest you don't do that because you're going to want to be able to access your email because we might send you a message and you might want to receive it, okay? So anyways, go to our website, cookcountyboardofreview.com. It's a brand new website, just started August 1st. Our old one was old and ugly and clunky. This one's really nice. It's got a lot of good information on it. The first thing you will see is the homepage. This is it. File an appeal. You'll click on it, and it will take you to a portal that looks like this. The portal was created about 2.5 years ago to go along with a new system we put in place, a truly revolutionary system called the Digital Appeals Processing System. We were the first office of our type to put something in place this sophisticated and this good. Prior to installing a digital system, everything we did, other than just the idea that you could file an appeal online, but everything that we did was on paper. An individual file, a paper file, was created for each appellant, each property that was filed at the Board of Review. And we printed off information about the property, and we put that paper information into the file, and the appellants, they submitted paper information, that went into the file. If it was a residential file, it might only be that thick. If it was a commercial or industrial file, it might be as thick as that, depending on the appraisals and all kinds of information the commercial property owner might submit. And I will tell you, 3 years ago, we had over 1 million of those paper files stored away in 4 different locations because we didn't have a single location that could hold all of them. We're required to save our files for 5 years by law, and then we were allowed to destroy them. So we had 5 years worth of those paper files. And if we wanted to access one of them, we had to go either to the 3rd floor of the county building, we're on the 6th floor, or we had to go to the basement, or we had to go to a remote warehouse about 1.5 miles from the building to get one of those files. Now, since 2 years ago, and this is the 3rd year we've had it in place, all files are electronic. They're digital. We can pull up anything we want in the last 2 years and this year by simply looking on a computer and looking on a computer screen. In any case, I've talked a lot about that. So filing an appeal through this portal. There's 2 ways to do it. Now, can everyone see where it says submit appeal as guest? I would suggest you don't do that. Because while it will allow you to file an appeal at that moment in time, after you withdraw from the system, you're done. There's no more interaction, okay? You are done in terms of doing anything else electronic, such as submitting your evidence. If you wanted to submit evidence after you withdrawn, you would have to do it by mailing it to us or delivering it to us, okay? So my suggestion is doing the one up top. See where it says log in, register? The login part is for someone who has previously created an account. Maybe nobody here has done that. So for most of you, you're going to want to register an account. So what you'll do is you'll register an account which will be your account for your house as long as you own that house, okay? And once you do that and you file your appeal, you'll click enter, and automatically there will be an electronic email sent to you confirming that you filed your appeal to say, you know, congratulations, you filed an appeal at the Board of Review, here's your complaint number. So you'll have that email, you can print it out, put it to the side just in case you want something on paper, you can have that complaint number to reference your case if you ever need to. But it gives you sort of immediate gratification. Did I really file? Did they really get it? Yeah, we really got it because you got an email saying that we really got it. But in addition to that, probably most of you, if you go home tonight and the deadline for filing is December 12th, you might say to yourself, I don't want to forget December 12th, I'm going to do it tonight. But you don't have any information, you don't have evidence, right? So you can file your appeal tonight, register an account, and then you can go do your research the next several days on your own, or you can go to the assessor's office and have them help you. And when you're ready with your evidence, you can go back in. You will have created a password, right? So don't forget your password, but you'll be able to go in, and then you can submit your evidence. Remember I told you earlier, download the information on the uniformity of the properties into a little file. You'll be able to go into that file in your computer and then upload that information into your registered account at the Board of Review. And in addition, you can, if you've got an appraisal that's in electronic form or a plat of survey, whatever you've got electronically, you can upload it to us. If you want to write us a note, a story about why you're filing your appeal, I encourage you to do that. We accept most file types. We don't accept Word. So convert the Word to PDF and then upload that to us, okay? If, by the way, you're not comfortable uploading things, maybe you don't know how to upload. You're like, upload, what's that? I used to be that way, by the way, until like 2 years ago, something. So anyways, if you don't know how to do that, it's okay. If you've got paper information, you can either deliver it to us, or probably better, you can mail it in to us, okay? What we will do with that paper information is we've got 4 big heavy-duty scanners. We'll scan it in, and it'll go into your file. And by the way, while you're doing this, if you feel like you are done, you're not going to submit any more information, there is a box you can click, I'm done. And at that point, we can put your file into circulation. You have to get all of your evidence in within 14 days after the date that the filing is due. So December 12th plus 14, I guess it's the 26th or so, all your evidence is due. I would request from all of you, get your evidence to us as quickly as possible, because if everybody waited to the last day, that would really delay what we do. And just so you understand, our volume, 2 records in a row. Year before last year, and we're probably going to break a record this year in number of filings. So last year, 208,000 complaints at the Board of Review. So if you can cooperate with us and get your evidence in, that helps us get our work done, and then tax bills go out in time, and the village gets their money, and the school gets their money, and they don't have to dip into their reserves or issue tax anticipation warrants to run their operations, okay? So anyways, that's how you file online at the Board of Review. Again, if anybody doesn't feel comfortable with this, we've got paper complaint forms out there for you, all right? All right, so next question is, once you do all this filing, who's going to review your appeal? So the Cook County Board of Review is run by 3 elected commissioners. Each represents a separate geographic district. My district is District number 1. It is the area you see in red and pink. So you can see that on the west, it's Barrington. On the east, northeast, it's Glencoe. On the south, I go all the way down to Chicago Heights, Olympia Fields, all the way over on the east to the border of Indiana where Lansing is. So a really big district. It's a lot of traveling when you're doing these seminars. But in any case, each commissioner has their own staff of analysts. When your appeal comes into the Board of Review, it's randomly distributed to one analyst who works for one of the commissioners. It may not go to an analyst who works for me. But whatever analyst gets it, they're going to review the information that you turned in. They're going to look at whatever they have available to them. And every analyst has access to a computer database with information about all the residential properties in Cook County, so they can look at that. And they're going to come to some kind of conclusion. They're going to type it in. Everything they look at is on a computer screen. They're going to type in their information or their decision. They're going to press a button. It's going to go to another analyst. That analyst will do the same thing. They'll come to a conclusion, write a decision, and then it goes to a third analyst. In order to get a reduction, 2 of the 3 analysts have to agree that a reduction is warranted. If you do not turn in any evidence at all, our analysts are instructed to automatically do a lack of uniformity analysis if there's no evidence presented. So it is possible, if you only file an appeal and you do nothing else, you may still be able to get a reduction from the Board of Review. My suggestion to you is that you do the work yourself for a couple of reasons. One, you know your house, you know your neighborhood better than anybody else. But more importantly, you're the most important person in the world to you, right? You're going to be your own best advocate and try to put your best foot forward. And I think that's worth a lot. So I know maybe someone's saying, if we don't have to do anything, why are we even doing the seminar? But I think it's important that American citizens understand that they have a right to redress their grievances with the government, and taxation is a big grievance. And you have a right to know how the system works and what the best way is to address your grievances. And so that's why I want to present this to you today. All right, so next question, last question. You go through the process. Several months from now, you receive a letter in the mail, and you get a no change, which means no reduction. Or you get a reduction, but it's not nearly what you thought you were entitled to. What can you do? You have 2 mutually exclusive options for further appeal. Option number 1 is you could file an appeal at the Circuit Court of Cook County. Now, if you do that, and you're not familiar with navigating a courtroom, you may have to hire an attorney. There may also be court costs. And I have to let you know, the Circuit Court on tax appeal cases is behind 4 years. But if you want to go there, your option. The other place is the Property Tax Appeal Board, PTAB for short. It is a state agency. It's not the county, it's the state of Illinois. People from all around the state of Illinois file appeals at the Property Tax Appeal Board. Information about PTAB will be on the letter you get from the Board of Review informing you of our decision. In order to file with PTAB, you have to file with them within 30 days of the date on the letter you get from the Board of Review informing you of our decision. If you take more than 30 days, they may not accept your appeal. Also, in order to file an appeal with PTAB, you first must have filed an appeal with the Board of Review. If you skip us, they won't accept your appeal. So if there's anybody here who has experience with my office and you filed 10 years in a row, and we've said no every time, and you hate us, and you think we're horrible, still file an appeal. You don't have to submit any evidence if you don't want. File an appeal to preserve your right to file a further appeal at the Property Tax Appeal Board. My experience with them is they're pretty friendly to residential property owners. There's no fee. You don't have to hire an attorney. You can do it all yourself. You can go, they have a website you can go to, and I'm not sure if you can file online, but they got the paperwork there at the very least. If you want to, you can ask them for a hearing. You can go in person and have a hearing. Most people don't do that, but you can if you want to. I will tell you that they are a severely underfunded state agency. So if you own commercial or industrial property, they too are behind 4 years. If you own residential property, they're only behind 2 years, which means that if you file an appeal with them, by the time they adjudicate the appeal, and if you get the decision you were looking for, you will already have paid the taxes on the assessment that you're appealing. So what will happen is, you will take the letter you got from PTAB, you'll bring it to the Cook County Treasurer's Office, you'll fill out some paperwork, and probably 3 or 4 months down the road, they will refund the amount you paid over and above the amount you should have paid, had you only had the PTAB decision from the very beginning. All right, so I'm trying to think if there's anything else I forgot. I can't think of it now. So thanks for being patient. If anyone has a question, since we're videotaping this, I'd appreciate your going up and using the mic to ask your question. So anybody?
Hi. I was wondering how many properties should you present in your evidence?
Good question. Okay, so I would suggest minimum of 3 properties. You probably don't need more than 5. We don't have a limit, so you can give us as many as you want. But just keep in mind that we're not doing this by computer. You know, we don't take your information and shove it into some sort of machine. There's human beings that are looking at this. So, you know, if you present 30 comparable properties, you may sort of be overloading the analyst who has perhaps hundreds of files in the queue that he's trying to get through, or she. So my suggestion is give us quality rather than quantity. But it is ultimately up to you, whatever evidence you want to give to us, and we will look at whatever you give us. Anybody else? Yes, sir.
In terms of square footage, what is a realistic deviation? Plus or minus what percent? 5%, 10%? So
the answer is we don't have a policy on that. We sort of leave it up to the analysts. All I can tell you is the closer, the better. The closer the square footage is, the more weight we'll give that particular parcel of property in determining whether or not you're overassessed. But I can't give you a percentage or even an actual number. But I would say, you know, if you have a classification like Class 202, that's less than 1,000 square feet, you know, that's a pretty small, narrow range. So if you're at 700 and you give us something that's at 900, that's going to be pretty good. You know, but if it's a Class 209, which is more than 5,000 square feet, and your house is 5,500, and you give us something that's 6,500, that'll still probably be pretty good because it's such a large property anyways. Oh, I've been reminded by my staff, when you came in, everybody got a survey. So if before you leave, you wouldn't mind filling out that survey and give us some feedback, because that'll help us for future seminars to know if we're doing a good job or if there's something we should add or subtract from our presentation. And just hand it to me or one of my staff before you leave. Anybody else? Sir, you have another one? Sure.
Does proximity to a busy street or on a golf course or next to the toll road or do anything, does that mean anything?
That's a common question. Yeah. And while we understand that if your house is on a busy street, that may mean it's worth less than a similar house a block away on a side street, it's up to you to present to us that information. So you can't just come in and say, here's my house on the busy street, here's 5 comparables like mine on a side street, and they're all assessed the same as mine, but mine should be less because it's on the busy street. We're not going to grant a reduction based on that. You have to, what I would suggest you do is say, here's 5 houses that have sold recently that are a block away on a side street, and this is how much they're selling for. Here's some houses on my street, the busy street, that have sold. This is what these are selling for. You can see that the ones on the busy street are less, because it's not up to us to try to guess what the effect is of busy street, or being near the river, or being by O'Hare Airport where the airplanes are flying. I mean, common sense says if an airplane's flying over the house, it's probably worth less than a house that's a mile away where there's no airplane, but we don't know how much less. We would be totally guessing if we tried to figure that out. It's up to you to present us with the evidence. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Dan, I've got a question for you as far as the benefit to requesting an appeal in person. You know, is there a benefit to that? I noticed on the form on the website there's a check, a box you can...
Thank you for asking that question, because that's what I forgot to talk about. So, you can ask for a hearing at the Board of Review. On the paper complaint form, there's a box that you can check off, or the electronic filing, you can check off a box there as well. And his question was, is there an advantage? I would say that if you've got a simple lack of uniformity appeal, you probably don't need to ask for a hearing. Our analysts can look at comparable properties and come up with a decent decision. But if you've got a case where you think that the written evidence might not be sufficient, where you think that you need to add something verbally about what's going on with your house or the area or other houses, then you might want to ask for a hearing. Like we talked earlier about an error in the square footage. Maybe you're one of the people that has that architect's drawing that's really hard to figure out, but if only you brought it in and you showed the analyst, this is what the drawing means, you can add something, and you wouldn't be able to do that by writing a story about it on paper. So my advice is, if the written evidence is sufficient, you don't need to come in for a hearing. But if you think you might need to add something to it, feel free to. And by the way, we're good at hearings. I'm at just about, unless I'm sick, I'm at every residential hearing. I will be there to check you in. And check in, there might be a short line. Maybe that takes a minute. From the time I check you in to the time you go in and talk to an analyst, more often than not, less than 1 minute. I'd be surprised if you have to sit and wait for 5 minutes. We're very efficient. And then talking to the analyst, it pretty much is, you know, you want to take 5-10 minutes, great. If you have a more complex case, you want to talk for 15 or 20 minutes, you can. Usually you don't need to. But we'll get you in and out. It's not what you're accustomed to with the government. Okay? We're better than your average government. So, yes, sir.
This one you may or may not be prepared to answer. How are neighborhoods determined in your area? You know, from
the neighborhoods are determined by the assessor's office. I have been told that he tries to group homes that he thinks are homogeneous. I think he does a decent job, not a perfect job. So I have had people tell me, hey, you know, I'm in this one particular neighborhood, but the houses really aren't like mine. You know, the whole thing is a complex built by a particular builder, but not mine. The builder that built mine is across the street, and I got stuck in this other one. But we are sort of stuck with what the assessor, how the assessor draws the lines. If anybody has an issue with that, I would suggest starting out by contacting your local township assessor. He's got a map of the township and how all the neighborhoods are divided. You can look at that, and then you can make a case and have the township assessor, Jerry Sadler, advocate for you with the Cook County assessor that maybe those lines should be adjusted. Okay? Okay.
And last question. How often are the assessed values refreshed on the comparables pages? Is that what?
Well, for instance, in Wheeling Township, the time for appealing to the assessor has expired. Right. He's made whatever changes. Those are refreshed. Those are on there.
They're already refreshed.
Yeah. And once we make a change, I'm not quite sure. You know, we send that information to the assessor. I know he gets it changed in time for the tax bill, but I'm not sure exactly when he will post it on the website. You'd have to ask him.
Thank you.
Another one? Sure. Come on.
In terms of market value, comparing to other houses, in my area, in my subdivision, there are some homes that are exactly like mine, but frankly, over the years, were trashed. They're really bad. And in the past year, you know, some construction companies took over. They bought them for quite a bit lower. Some construction companies you know, rebuilt them basically, and, you know, are now selling them for, or hopefully getting a lot more. But meanwhile, the market value is way down. Could I use those homes?
You could. I mean, we would like accurate information about those homes.
I mean,
so.
from the outside, they look fine. It's the inside is ruined, you know.
Yeah. Well, I mean, so it sounds like the question is, can I trick you?
Yeah, okay. Yeah.
Maybe you could. I mean,
Okay.
we don't have access to every detail of every property, so it is possible people occasionally trick us. That's true. Yeah. Anybody else? All right. I want to take a moment and introduce 3 people from my staff. On the left, or my left, Chuck, Dan, and Namrita. They're all analysts at the Board of Review. As we finish up here, if anyone has any individual questions that you want to talk to me about, I'll stay up here. But they do this work every day. You can ask the same questions to them. They can help you out. If you want to fill out a paper complaint form, we've got them. You can fill it out and hand it to one of us. And if you've got those surveys done, please give them to us as well. There's a place for your name. You know, don't feel like you got to sign your name. It's not a big deal. And I want to just say thank you for coming. And if we can ever help you, we'll do our very best to do so. Thank you.